So emotional intimacy, you call it the workhorse of all of the pillars. Emotional intimacy in practical terms is what? What would you have us do as just baby steps?
Just as a baby step, I would encourage the two of you to get out and do something called a walk and talk. You know, so often it can be hard to sit across from your spouse and have them peering into your eyes and just hanging on your very next word. Whereas if you get out and you get moving, you're side by side. It reminds the two of you that you're on the same team.
Okay.
Conversations can be easier too when you're not staring into one another, but you can hear the conversation happening. And so it allows your body to move, your heart to move, and connection to happen.
If you would like weekly content that builds your faith and helps you walk out all that God has for your life, subscribe and be a part of LifeFamily.
And I'm just so thrilled that you're here. You're here on a special day because I have two amazing guests, Tony and Alisa DiLorenzo. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Y'all were here all for a 2-hour intensive yesterday with our couples. I want to thank you for the bottom of my heart for pouring into our couples. Oh, I love them so much. Today is about covenant. It's about marriage. If you're a single adult here, I want you to take copious notes, whatever copious means. I want you to take those notes because you may not need it now or in 5 years, but you will need them eventually. This information is transformational. If you are a single adult and either you are coming out of a relationship that didn't end well, your heart's hurting, we want to have hope for you. And if you're in a marriage that just seems lifeless, there's hope for you too. So I'm just thrilled. Before we jump into how you can help me, I've found myself in a bit of trouble. So I'm glad I have some experts here to help me. Based upon your book, I want to do something romantic for my wife. So I took her to breakfast. I said, I want to take you to a nice place, Jim's. They laugh. I know you're not from here. Jim's is kind of a scaled-down Denny's.
Oh.
Nice.
That's romance.
Yeah, it's very romantic. I was happy. She, not so much. But we went over here to it and walked in, and it was packed. And I'm like, what is happening here? This is not usually packed. I asked the lady, I was going to say flight attendant, but it's not flight attendant. I asked the waitress, I said, what's happening here? You know, I know her. She said, we had a bus pull up. Like, So she said, it's okay. You're a regular. We'll put you on. We'll get you in quickly. Go on the other side of all those people standing is a U-shaped couch. Just go sit over there. Your wife's already over there. Like, fine. So I was like, hey, excuse me. I got over to the couch, sat down, grumbling, mad. Can't believe this many people here today. And I kind of got passed out. I reached over and put my hand on her leg and just started kneading it a little bit and rubbing it. And then I heard this sound, Tony and Alisa. It was like, psst, Randy. And I thought to myself, that sounds like the voice of my wife. Which sent a cold chill down my spine. I looked to my left, and there was Denise over there.
Oh, no. Because your hand was over there.
So I stood up, and I said to the lady, ma'am, I am so sorry. She said, I'm not.
How'd the rest of that date go?
It was chilly. And I don't mean the weather.
Right.
So I'm thankful y'all are here to help me. You were recognized as one of the leaders of marriage enrichment in the country. I started following you not because I knew you, and I had never met you till yesterday. And I followed you because someone reposted something, and I'm like, that's so good. And I followed you, and I tell you, you've helped me as a husband, and I appreciate it. What was the catalyst that kind of brought you to start and do one extraordinary marriage.
Really, the catalyst was, and I think this is the case for so many people, when you're in your own dysfunction and you find a way out, I think there's a mandate on us to help others. And, 11, 12 years into our marriage, we found ourselves staring down the face of divorce. We had a 2 and a 5-year-old. And if we didn't figure out how to do marriage well, how to make this relationship a priority, it was very conceivable that we would get divorced either immediately or when that 2-year-old turned 18. She's 19 now, and we're still together.
Yes, you are. Thank the Lord. That's your family.
There's a picture
Oh,
of
there
our
they
family.
are.
Right on.
Yeah.
Hey, there's right there to our left is our wonderful son, Alex, 22-year-old. And then there's our gorgeous daughter, Abby, right there, 19-year-old.
They are beautiful. There should be one more family member in this picture. And there's not. Do you mind telling us that story?
So back in 2004, Alex had just turned 2 on December 13th, and I was 18 weeks pregnant. And woke up the next day and started having contractions. And called my OBGYN, and he said, you need to get to the hospital right away. And so we went to the hospital, and I was put in a bed on a labor and delivery floor. And a few hours later, our son Andrew was delivered at 18 weeks. Never took a breath. We held his little body in our hands. He just barely fit in the palm of our hands. And when you get pregnant, you don't think it's ever going to end in anything else but the baby that you're going to take home and listen to coo and, have all the little chubby rolls and everything else. And so I didn't know what to do with this place of walking out of a hospital without my baby. I didn't know how to lean into Tony. I didn't know what to do with all of the well wishes that said, well, your baby's in heaven, or God needed your baby, or any of these types of phrases, because it was just so dark. And I completely retreated and couldn't even barely be a wife, could barely be a mother to our 2-year-old. And it was probably one of the darkest seasons in our marriage.
Yeah, when Alisa says it was a dark season in our marriage, it lasted for about 2 years. So this wasn't like, oh, okay, we lost a child, and then 2 weeks later, or a month later, we were up and rolling again. And so there was a lot of just hurt, pain that we both weren't dealing with it together, and so it was a long journey.
Pastoring people, when I know couples that have gone through that, most sadly don't stay together. Is it just because there's just too much pain in the room?
There's a lot of pain, and mothers and fathers, husbands and wives grieve differently.
Yeah.
And losing a child is one of those things that kind of feels out of the order of how things are supposed to go. And it's hard to talk about it when somebody's lost a child and you don't know what to say, and husbands and wives don't know what to say. And there's not a lot, I think, voice given to the loss of a child, even though it does happen so often.
That was one of a major challenge that God brought you through. But Tony, you came into the marriage, you were not a believer.
No,
you
we
came
weren't
into
believers.
the marriage with a lot of baggage. You've been pretty open and honest about that yesterday. I don't know if you feel comfortable here talking about it, but...
Absolutely. So I came into the marriage with a pornography addiction. At 12 years old, I was introduced to porn from just buddies of mine. Actually, my dad even had it in his closet and found it in his closet. And so from the age of 12 to when I met my beautiful wife, Alisa, at 21 years old, it had been part of my life, something I'd look at here and there, then, and whatever, just depending on what was going on. But as we got married, we weren't believers, got married by a Methodist minister in beautiful Temecula, California. You think marriage is going to be one thing. And as a 23-year-old young man, it wasn't turning out what I thought it would be. And so instead of engaging with Alisa and trying to figure out what's going on between her and I, it was easier to go look at porn. And it was easy to go into chat rooms and do those sort of things that disconnected us even more.
Yeah.
And so 7 years into our marriage, about 3 years after I came to Christ, I actually had a moment. I was walking down our hallway. Alisa was in our living room with our 1-year-old Alex, who you guys got to see. My computer was in our garage, and so she was in there. I made a quick left out the door into the garage, and I was about to go look at pornography again, and I heard the voice of God said, "It is finished." And before I could even turn on my screen, that voice came on, and I didn't even turn it on. I turned right back into the living room and told Alisa what I had just heard and what I was going to do, and that was 18 years ago, and I have not looked at it ever since.
Well, thank you, Jesus. For the men and women here today listening to your story, we may not have heard the voice of God to say, "It's finished," which I love that, by the way. It may be a different process for men and women who are believers and unbelievers. It's not a linear delivery. It's like this. What do you say to men, but also women who are occasionally viewing or maybe compulsively viewing? How do they get out of that trap?
One thing I want to say is prayer. And believe me, I was praying. I was believing. And if you are, you have to continue. What I thought was so beautiful at the beginning of service. Hey, you have ministers and pastors down here. If you need a breakthrough, if you need something, come down. Come, release it. Know that we have a Heavenly Father who loves you and cares for you. If you're steep in it, and again, when I say I had a pornography addiction, there was a point in time when we were married that I was looking at it anywhere from about 6 to 8 hours a day. We're not talking about, I was looking at it a little bit. I mean, I was in it. And as with any addiction, alcohol, drugs, any other addiction, there are times when we need to get help. We need to get out of what we're doing. And so as you guys have here, Celebrate Recovery, there's, Alcoholics Anonymous for alcoholics, but there's also, sexual addiction. Sexual addiction. Get help. Not everybody's breakthrough is going to happen in the same way. I do believe that God can give you a word, but you need to listen to it and you need to walk through that door with him when he gives it to you. But there are many ways that you can overcome that addiction.
Thank you, Tony. That's so brave of you. The church hasn't done a very good job of being a place where people felt safe to come talk about that. I've heard men say, "Hey, it's not hurting anybody. It's just something I do to escape or become distracted or pleasure or whatever. Nobody's getting hurt." Alisa, is anybody getting hurt by what Tony's doing?
I would say a lot of people are getting hurt. If you're looking at porn, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your spouse, your family, your community. It's a distraction from the covenant that God ordained between husband and wife. And I know as a wife, I felt so disconnected from Tony. I would feel unworthy. I questioned my value. I questioned my beauty. I questioned myself. And why would he be married to me if this was something that he preferred to do? And it became this huge chasm in our marriage because I just didn't feel like I was enough. And that was something that we had to work through. And we're here in front of all of you today, 28 years married, and able to say that there is hope on the other side of pornography.
Yes,
there's God's abundance and grace and just so much on the other side of freedom from that addiction.
Oh, thank the Lord. You're a beacon of hope to so many. You came to know the Lord Jesus. You were raised Catholic, I believe. Is what
Yeah, we
you
were
said?
both raised Catholic.
But you didn't know the Lord in a vibrant faith that you do now. How did you come to know the Lord? It was separate, right?
Yeah, so in 2000, I started a through hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. So the Pacific Crest Trail starts on the border of California and Mexico. You go all the way through California, Oregon, and then Washington, and end up in British Columbia, Canada. And so in 2000, I partook on this adventure. And about 500 miles in, I met this guy named Arkansas Dave. We named him Arkansas Dave because he was from Arkansas. Pretty simple. But Dave is a Christian, but going through tough times. And I got to know Dave. He was going through a divorce, and he was losing his business. And he was out there to just talk to God, which I found sort of interesting because I really didn't know what he was really talking about. Mom had given me footprints, so I would read footprints every night. But Dave and I got into many conversations, and we would talk about this God and Jesus. And I just remember at one point in time at the flanks of Mount Jefferson in Oregon, and we were camping there that night, and I got the courage to say, hey, Dave, who is this Jesus? And he threw me a little travel Bible, and he goes, hey, read John. Growing up Catholic, though, I'm like, who's John? And he goes, open up, go to the fourth book there and read. And it was in that night, as I was laying there under the stars, that I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus. And when you're out there, it's amazing. I was having this encounter while Alisa was back home, though, in Orange County.
Yeah, so, Tony leaves for the trail, and I've got all these great plans. I'd never lived by myself. I'd gone directly from my parents' house to the college dorm to the sorority house to marriage, and so there was always somebody with me, somebody there to protect me, keep me company, that type of thing. And so I had all these great plans. I'm like, if anything happens, I'm going to hole up in my closet, and I'm going to call 911, and I'm prepared. Except for the night that I start hearing all of this banging at the front door of our apartment. And I forget about the closet, I forget about 911, and I go and I stare at the peephole. And there are 3 very big men who are trying to get into this apartment because they believe it is their apartment. I actually recognized them. I knew they lived 2 doors down, but I also knew they were very drunk and very big and pounding on my door. And so I just stood there going, okay, what do I do? Hopefully they'll figure it out. When all of a sudden behind me there was this voice that came out of nowhere, and it just said, this is not your apartment. And they froze. It was definitely a scales fall from their eyes type of moment. And they look up and they start laughing. They're like, dude, that's the wrong apartment. We're 2 doors down. And so they walk along their merry way, but I'm scared to turn around because I don't know who's in my apartment. And I didn't know who got their attention. And then all of a sudden there was just this peace that came over me because just in that moment I knew that God had me. And that he had protected me, because the next day, when I opened up the front door, pulled the chain off, the entire molding of the door collapsed into the doorway. The only thing, I am convinced, the only thing that kept me safe that night was the voice of God telling them that they had the wrong place.
Oh, it's
God
good.
got a hold of my heart that night.
Good. You've overcome so much. You talk about your addiction, you talk about the loss of a child, and then you have this God moment separately. He just breaks in on you. I love that so much. And then at some point, you're fully awakened spiritually. How do you get to discover and we should be in marriage enrichment? Because it seems so unlikely.
Yeah, so there was that point at 11 years where Alisa said, we could either get divorced when the youngest turns 18, or get radical. And so we decided to get radical. At that point in time in our marriage, it was just this time where we were just like, enough's enough. There's no more of doing what we've been doing. And we were leading a small group. We were talking about sexual intimacy, the Song of Solomon. And we had such a great experience there that one of the couples told our small group director, and Alisa and I got to speak on stage at the next marriage event, marriage getaway that the church had put on. And as we were coming off and just talking to everybody, everybody's like, hey, what's next? That was so great. The questions that even came in some of them were tough to answer because we were just sort of like, this is what we're doing in our marriage. But we're like, nothing's next. We're like, we're good. Lisa and I are good.
Yeah.
But about a year later, that's when we heard the knock of Tony and Alisa, like from God going like, it's time. Like you need to bring hope. You need to bring encouragement. And so on January 13th, 2010, 15 years ago now, we released the first episode of the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. And we've been doing an episode every week for the last 15 plus years.
Fantastic.
Over 800 episodes now.
My goodness. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that was the tipping point, and you've been going around the country like this and showing up at churches, and you've helped me and so many people. I love this book. I should be on commission.
We'll see what we can do.
I don't know why you're not giving me a commission, because I've bought so many of these books and given them away. I love the book. Did them in small group and gave them to people, and still am, man. It's called the 6 Pillars of Intimacy. Why pillars? Why not, doors, steps, windows? Why pillars?
I would love to say that I wrote this book, but really this was a book that God gave me to write. And God also gave me the visual of the pillars. And, as I was preparing to write this book, I very much had this image of what a pillar does. If you think about like Greek or Roman architecture, you see the columns, the pillars that provide strength. They provide so much strength to the building and hold it up. They also provide beauty. We see that and we recognize that. And the revelation was that these 6 different intimacies would actually be the strength and the beauty that would allow couples to create their own extraordinary marriage.
Oh, this is so good, so good. All right, so there's 6 pillars. We can't hit these like you did yesterday. That was so good. But we do have the 6 pillars up here. Take a picture of that, if you would, with your phones, because these pillars hold up the covenant. And if they're all strong, you've probably got a healthy, vibrant covenant. If they're cracked, if the pillars are cracked, they're flawed, it's tough. It's tough. So emotional intimacy, what's that?
This is the closeness and connection that comes from sharing your thoughts, feelings, and desires. It's going beyond let's talk, which makes everybody want to run in the other direction.
Definitely.
Instead of having a conversation, people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. But it's developing the skill. And I do want to say that each of these pillars of intimacy aren't something you're inherently born with or you weren't. It's an opportunity to actually develop skills so that we learn how to talk. Tony and I never, if you had seen us in the early years of our marriage, we could not hold sentences together because we were talking over each other, we were cutting each other off, we were,
I think that happened a lot in even the first couple of years of the podcast. I got a lot of like hate mail and hate email from folks being like, Tony, you cut Alisa off all the time. And I'm like, well, I don't want to hear her talk. Like, I want to talk.
So emotional intimacy, you call it the workhorse of all of the pillars. Emotional intimacy in practical terms is what? What would you have us do as just baby steps?
Just as a baby step, I would encourage the 2 of you to get out and do something called a walk and talk. So often it can be hard to sit across from your spouse and have them peering into your eyes and just hanging on your very next word. Whereas if you get out and you get moving, you're side by side. It reminds the 2 of you that you're on the same team.
Okay.
Conversations can be easier too when you're not staring into one another, but you can hear the conversation happening. And so it allows your body to move, your heart to move, and connection to happen.
That's great. Physical intimacy is not sexual intimacy. It's different. How is it different?
Yeah, so your physical intimacy is all those loving touches, hugs, kisses, cuddles, foot rubs, massages that are non-sexual touch. And when Alisa and I started writing the 6 Pillars of Intimacy, our community, we call them the One Family, and we heard so much feedback from them. In this one, physical intimacy, they would say, oh, I want physical touch, and then we'd learn they're like, well, they're really just saying they want sex. And yet, we were born to have that physical intimacy, right? And so we separate these so that way you can put your hand on your spouse. You can lay next to one another on the couch and still have that closeness and connection with one another, and yet you don't have to go all the way to sexual intimacy. And I would say you wouldn't put your hand on another person's spouse.
That's a free one.
Or another
Little
woman.
extra.
Like your own spouse.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah. Just felt like I needed to help you along here today while we're here.
Appreciate that. This is the tough one, financial intimacy,
Yes.
the connectedness of sharing what your goals are, a budget. Why is that so hard for us?
Because if I were to ask the question, how many of you use money, how many of you would raise your hands?
So if you use money in this room, just raise your
Raise
hand
your
if
hand.
you use money.
Yep.
Cash,
Okay,
check.
there's a lot of people who don't raise their hand.
I don't think
I
they
don't
want
know
to
what
raise
they
their
use.
hand.
No.
They're
They're not hand raisers?
not hand raisers.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, I got it.
The
wanna
reason
make
we
sure they're
need
using money,
the
though.
reason we need to talk about closeness and connection in everything that the two of you do with money is because it's a part of your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of that covenant relationship, and dealing with our baggage, dealing with all of the mindsets that we bring into marriage, and then dealing with what the two of us have to navigate as a married couple with our finances. I mean, there's closeness and connect. It can be done. And what I love about LifeFamily is that you guys have done financial peace. You value equipping the congregation here with skills to be able to do finance as well.
Thank you. The one spouse who is pretty good with finances keeps the other spouse in the dark who may not be good with it. That's dangerous, isn't it? That's not intimacy. How does a couple emerge from that paradigm of, don't worry, I got this, and how do you do life together for this pillar?
So it starts off very slowly. I actually have coaching clients. They sent me an email yesterday right after we finished the workshop. And they sat down and they had one conversation yesterday, the first of many. Let me say that, it's not a one and done, the first of many. And they just started talking about where they wanted to spend money. Just started.
Yeah.
And then they treated themselves to their favorite bento box for lunch. But you start small. Too often in a pillar like this, we want to lay out the spreadsheets and we want to look at the entire picture and talk for 4 hours, when really your spouse might have about a 10-minute attention span to start with.
That's me. So just start with a small conversation.
You're welcome.
The pillar that why we're here today is this pillar. We're working on this pillar, which is spiritual. I mean, look at the people here and 2 services, and we don't just tell our spouse to go to church. We go to church together. My heart hurts for people who are married that their spouse won't come with them. They worship alone. It just makes me sad. But how important is spiritual intimacy to the health of holding that pillar up strong, which holds the covenant?
I would say it's everything. It's everything. Having God at the center of your marriage. I actually say in the book that strong spiritual intimacy can actually be more powerful than strong sexual intimacy, because it's this place of not just knowing your spouse and how they communicate with God, but also allowing them to hear you and how you're communicating with God, how you're serving God. It's such a beautiful strength. And we've seen it since we've been here at LifeFamily, that there's just this strong undercurrent of strength in this area of marriage.
Thank you. Tony, as a new believer, you were born again. You wanted to go all in as a spiritual, you wanted to be that spiritual guy. So one of the things you talked about was praying out loud, which is so difficult for us fellas to pray out loud. It's just a muscle we haven't used. But you went all in, you got the courage, you did it. And Alisa's reaction was just wonderful. Can you describe that first time you prayed out loud with Alisa, shoot.
Yeah, so I got the courage to step in, and I was like, I want to pray. I need to pray for us and for our family. And so I said, Alisa, let's pray. And I start to pray. And before I could really even get into what I wanted to start saying, and I wasn't sure what I was going to say either. I mean, I was just sort of like, okay, God, just lead me and let's go do something here together. As I just started, Alisa started giggling like a 7th grade girl at like a slumber party. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're not praying. And it took the wind out of me. I will say that. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, it was great. And then I just took charge, and I was just like, that's all right, devil, we're binding you, and you're gone, and we're going for it. No, I slinked away. I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're not doing that right now. And so it took me a little bit of time to gain that courage again.
Yeah.
Got into a church, got around a bunch of men, and we started praying. I started working that muscle, and going, okay, like I can do this. And then a couple of years ago, it was now, Alisa and I, we were looking at our pillars and going, this one has some cracks in it. And we need to get into praying again. And so we started stepping in and praying with one another about 3 times a week.
Well, why were you laughing at Tony?
I think I was just uncomfortable. Like, if I can be very honest, growing up Catholic, having my husband, like, I'd never seen my dad pray over my mom. And so it was just this, like, oh, this is different. And some of us have that reaction. My daughter has it too. When you're uncomfortable, you start to laugh. And sometimes it's uncontrollable, and it sounds like a girl's slumber party.
But you have appreciated what it took for a man to get to that point to pray out loud, and I'm sure now it's wonderful.
Well, I mean, we do very little without praying for one another at this point in time in our marriage, because we know we've seen so many answered prayers. We know God still does miracles. We know that we can't do anything by ourselves. What we've done with this book, what we've done with One Extraordinary Marriage, this is God's ministry. We just get to be the mouthpiece for it.
Spiritual pillar it has to be strong, because you're going to encounter things you don't know where to look, and if you've got God as the center, there's hope. Recreational intimacy, never thought those two words went together. What is recreational intimacy?
Well, it's all about having fun. Remember when you were dating and you couldn't wait to go have fun or go grab a bite to eat or go, see a show or do something, and then, somewhere along the way, bills and kids and work, and I'm too tired and we don't have money for that. And before you know it, you're like, oh, let's not do anything. And I want to say to all the married couples, it's okay that marriage is fun. In fact, I would love for there to be a hat. We were talking about this earlier. I would love for there to be the hat that says "Make Marriage Fun Again," where we step into this place where the singles are all looking at the married couples and going, what are they doing and why are they having so much fun? We need to be that example, not just to our children, to our community, but also, you all are here in Austin. Make this be a place where, people are asking the question, what's happening with the marriages in Austin? Why are they so fun?
I love that. I got to put the fun back in mine. I'm becoming old. Let's just stay here. I was preaching on marriage. I came across your Instagram. Mm-hmm. I've since listened to your podcast. I love them. But your Instagram has so many great posts, and there was one like, oh, I got to use that in my message. So I was preaching along, and I found this amazing Instagram site, and I want you to subscribe to it. I put you up there. Your whatever posting, and I said, I want everybody in the church to follow One Extraordinary Marriage on your Instagram podcast. Everybody, go and follow them today. And people were like, oh, great, a tool to help us. And I thought that was great. And then the next day, Monday, you posted something that was just extra spicy.
We've been known to do that from time to time.
About this pillar, sexual intimacy, and I just said, dear Jesus, all of those folks I told to go look. I love the spicy. I love spicy. But churches haven't been willing to be spicy, because we just bland and good people. Man, we need some spicy.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Stay frisky, my friends.
That might be a better hat.
Yeah, that's better hat.
That's a better hat.
I think that would be.
A red one.
Stay frisky, my friends.
Stay frisky,
We're in Texas.
What have you found? Do we just kind of coast through this one? Early on, it's exhilarating and fun, and you're trying to figure it out. But then at some point, the sexual intimacy just wanes, and what happens there? Did you just...
Yeah, I think in the beginning we have this newness. Any of us have been married more than a second. Alisa and I have been married for 28 years. I think there's a newness, right? And then as the years go on, it's sort of like, it's sort of the same thing, or things come up as we've talked about here today. Things begin to happen. And I would say, if you begin to look at the 5 pillars before the sexual intimacy, and you begin to strengthen those pillars, what can happen over the years is actually this last pillar, your sexual intimacy pillar, will become even stronger and more like exciting than when you were newlyweds, because you get to know one another. That closeness and connection matters. And I would say 28 years in, with all the stuff that Alisa and I have been through, our sexual intimacy now is stronger than it's ever been, and it's better than it's ever been.
Because of the strength of the other pillars.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. I want you to go to their, everything is oneextraordinarymarriage.com.
Oneextraordinarymarriage.com, One Extraordinary Marriage. If you want to find us on Instagram, on your favorite podcast app, Facebook, anything of that nature, One Extraordinary Marriage.
And we might be spicy from time to time.
You are spicy, and I like that.
I'm just going to put it out there so nobody's surprised tomorrow.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, tomorrow's going to be a spicy?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but it might be.
But just in case it is, you've been warned. You won't be caught off guard this time.
Oh, boy.
We'll have to make sure now. Like, we'll have to double extra make sure.
Yeah. Oh,
Double spicy.
all right. There's hope.
There is.
I was, after the first service, a gentleman that I love dearly, he's a divorced man, and he said, that was painful. I said, really, why? Because I found it to be so hopeful. He said, I don't have I'm looking at a life of regret that caused the end of that, and now here I am. People who have loved, and then it didn't end well. Is there hope for them? How do they get to this place of, Lord, is there something for me?
Yes. We have seen many couples in the one family get divorced, remarry. We've even seen couples in the one family who've been married, gotten separated, divorced, and then remarried to each other.
Wow.
And so, is there hope? Absolutely. These 6 pillars can work for you if you're not married right now. Alisa and I have been blessed to lead young adults, and we've taken through the 6 pillars of intimacy and go, where do you have cracks in these pillars internally, yourself, and where are they strong?
Yeah.
And can you strengthen that? Because the strength of you meeting that next person is going to be so much better than if you're in shambles.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for your ministry all over the world. Thank you for making me a better husband for my beautiful Denise. And to all of you, I love you so much.
Thank you so much for being a part of our service today. And we hope and pray that this message touched your heart. And we want to hear from you. We want to get to know you. There are several links below this video that you can connect and let us know what's going on in your life. So we would love to invite you to do that. But most importantly, if you made a decision to follow Jesus today, that is amazing, and we want to celebrate you. I invite you to text Next Steps to 22999. We'll respond with a text and give you some resources and next steps for your faith journey. So we just celebrate you and want to invite you to do that. Thank you so much for making this decision to follow Jesus. It's amazing. So thank you again for being a part of our service today. We will see you next time.
If you don't have a home church, we would love to invite you to be part of LifeFamily. Remember, you belong here. Join us again next Sunday or any time throughout the week. Hit that bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Hope to see you again soon.